As for grief, we find it comes in waves. At first, the waves are 100 feet tall and crash over you mercilessly, one after the next. They come seconds apart with no time to catch your breath. You feel like you're drowning, and all you can do is hang on and float. Then, after some time has passed, the waves are still monstrous, but they don't come as often. When they arrive, they crash over you and wipe you out. But you can breathe. In between the waves, there's life. Even further down the line, you find that the waves are only 50 or 60 feet tall, and while they still come, they come much further apart. You may even see them coming, an anniversary, a birthday, or the holidays. And as it washes over you, you know that somehow you will come out the other side. Soaking wet, sputtering, stumbling perhaps, but you will come out. We know the waves never stop coming, and somehow we don't really want them to. But we learn we will survive them, and restored is the hope for peace and healing. And that, my dear friends, is your grief journey.
Good afternoon. My name is Bob Callis. On behalf of my family and our entire staff, thank you for joining us today at our 13th annual program, aimed at helping you with your grief journey during the first holiday season. We understand how difficult life can be after a loss. Everyone goes back to their lives, and you're left with your grief. Like you, our staff members have experienced loss: parents, spouses, siblings, and children. Because we've had to deal with our own losses, we know the holidays can be very difficult, especially this year, a year so many hope will end quickly, and one many of us hope we will never experience again. COVID-19 has had quite an impact on the way we live our lives, and an even greater impact on what we have been able to do when life comes to an end. A number of our families were devastated because they were not able to be with their loved one when he or she died. Due to restrictions at hospitals, nursing homes, and other facilities, their loved one died alone. Families were also left feeling lost because they could not celebrate their loved one's life due to restrictions placed on the number of people who could assemble for a funeral service or gathering, even an outside graveside service. And now the holidays are upon us. Feelings which we may have been able to suppress as we return to our daily lives, those feelings are bubbling up on the surface again as the holidays approach, because we realize that someone special will be missing, someone who left, and in many cases, they left without our having a chance to say goodbye or I love you. It just seems so unfair. The pandemic has also affected the way we present this year's program. In the past, we have held the program in our funeral home chapel, but due to social distancing guidelines, that is impossible right now. However, we were certain that 2020, of all years, was one when we had to do something, and so we offer you this video instead. You will notice, and you may think it odd, that the room is decorated for the holidays, but there is a reason. All around you, the malls, shops, and even restaurants are already decorated. And there are ads on television, in the newspaper, on every social media to promote the season. Our decorations serve as a reminder that you will not be able to hide from the upcoming holidays or just wish them away. Like everything else we face this year, you need to address the holidays head on, and that's what we hope to help you do today. We are grateful to our distinguished panelists seated with me and appreciate their continued support throughout the years. Starting on my immediate left, we have Pastor Chuck Sheetenhelm, Executive Pastor at Chesapeake Christian Fellowship in Davidsonville. Chuck was one of the founders of our program when we initiated it in 1998. Then we have Pastor Jeff Steppe. Until July of this year, Jeff was the lead pastor at the First Christian Church at Brock Hall in Upper Marlboro. He recently became pastor of the Christian Church at Cogan Station in Pennsylvania. Next, we have Reverend Catherine Klemstein. She's a retired chaplain from the Hospice of the Chesapeake. Like Chuck, Catherine was also one of our founding members. She was instrumental in forming our partnership with hospice to develop this program. Lastly, Father Tom Ryan, currently the chaplain at Archbishop Spalding High School in Severn, previously pastor at Holy Family Catholic Church in Davidsonville. Many thanks to all four of you for your continued participation and support, especially the support you provide us throughout the year, helping us with services and celebrations. I'd also like to offer special thanks to the Hospice of the Chesapeake's Life Center. It has been a great partnership these past 13 years. In fact, they provide many of the handouts our panelists will be referring to today. All of the handouts can be found on our website by clicking the Your Grief Journey Handouts tab. Now, I wish to call attention to the table in front of our panelists. There are 5 candles on the table. Each one has a meaning, which will be described near the end of the program. At that time, we will invite you to join us in a candle lighting ceremony. You may wish to have a candle with you during that time to light in memory of your loved one. The candle in the middle is already lit. It represents community. As many of you have probably realized, reaching out and relying on others for support can be very helpful as you work through your grief. Because we look at this event today as a community effort to help you, that candle will remain lit for the entire program. We hope you find the program beneficial. While we do not have the ability to be interactive today, we welcome the opportunity to respond to any questions you may have. Simply send your questions to holiday@callisfuneralhomes.com. Type question on the subject line. We will forward your question to our panelists for an answer, and they will respond to you as quickly as possible. I'd now like to ask Father Ryan to approach the podium. Thank you.
And we pray. Lord God, creator of man and woman and child and all that is, you gather what you have made in life and in death. We ask you to help us trust you in believing that as the Lord has won victory over life and death, we remain his brothers and sisters. Help us, Lord God, to be like your Son, who even in dying still called you with trust Father, and found in your love the peaceful moment of acceptance and surrender. By the bread of the words that we share this day, feed us with your strength, your trust, and your hope forever and ever. Amen. Sometimes I think we preachers and ministers, present company accepted, of course, appear perhaps to construct a kind of protective distance between ourselves and those who are grieving at wake services and funeral liturgies of various kinds. So as I look at you, and I've done this many times, I feel compelled to erase gently that pastoral pedestal and that distance, and just be uncommonly honest with you, aware, as I certainly am, I do not like taking personal risks, and I hesitate to share anything or much that is painfully personal about myself, except when I believe it might be a help to someone else. I'm very glad that when the Callis family constructed this memorial chapel as they did, they didn't put the podium on a pedestal, creating a kind of distance between us and those who gather. Realizing, perhaps as they did and as we do at this moment, that we are all on the same level playing field when it comes to our experience of the mystery of life and death, as mysterious as that remains, and life again in Jesus Christ. The risk part is this: I'm the youngest of 6 siblings, and as the apples fell from my family tree and through the gift of priesting, I have buried my alcoholic biological father, my very loving stepdad, my very caring and very self-sacrificing mother, my sister with whom I was closest, another sister who overdosed on narcotics, and 2 brothers who died out of time and place, and two fellows who were, to say the least, in my younger years, surrogate heroes. I had one remaining sister who did not go gentle into that good night. She died of Alzheimer's, insisting almost to the very end that I was someone named Bob who dented her Ford at a Walmart in Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania. And then not long after that, she died. So I share that with you not to elicit any particular empathy or pity, but only to be clear that I have no immunity against the slings and arrows of outrageous misfortune, and that I find that a cynical myth, and that I really am, we really are, your brother and your sisters on the same level playing field that is otherwise known as life on life's terms. Unfortunately, I never had the opportunity to take advantage of the kind of program that the Callis family is offering this morning and providing for the sake of your spiritual support and a moment of very humane comfort. And instead, by far, my biggest mistake was to look for God's solace in all the wrong places at all the wrong times, especially at the empty bottom of a whiskey bottle in a near fatal friendship with Jack Daniels, whose lies and promises of comfort ultimately betrayed me. And as with my colleagues here this morning, I have ministered at many funerals and burials of hundreds and hundreds of people, family, friends, sometimes complete strangers. And at some point, I realized some years ago that I really did not have a genuine understanding or feeling for what grief and grieving essentially was and is. And finally, when, as the prodigal son did, I came to my senses and decided to return to my father, I consulted a man who I thought was very wise, Father Michelman, a Jesuit priest, whose kindness and wisdom was beyond any expectation I had. And he told me that I could only feel grief when I understood and accepted my feelings. But I was born into a kind of family culture that rarely expressed feelings, except perhaps for anger and, by its extension, rage. So I was encouraged by Father Michelman to consider that all or most of my feelings could be imagined under 4 huge umbrellas, under which every possible human feeling could somehow be found. The umbrellas were mad, sad, glad, and afraid. And that really helped me as time went on, considerably as a matter of fact, to anchor in my life and within my heart what was happening when I grieved. And it has taken me some time, some years, but I've discovered that genuine grief, at least for me, is a loving expression of profound gratitude. And it took me a long time to parse and ponder that manner of understanding grief, but it's carried me subsequently through many a personal crash and burn. Grief and grieving, a loving expression of profound gratitude. And so I leave you with that, if it helps, and the thought that with Thanksgiving and ultimately the liturgical season of Advent is relatively fast approaching. And for some of us, this will be a muted Thanksgiving and Advent and Christmas, to say the least. And yet, as we lean into those particular times and moments, all I really know, after all of these years and after all the parchments behind me at my desk at home saying that I have degrees in God, all I really know is that God keeps many secrets, but he has revealed some very important of his mysteries. And one of the most important is celebrated at Christmas, the incarnation of Jesus Christ. Emmanuel, God is with us, for better, for worse, in every moment, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, even unto death. And that has helped me, and perhaps it will help you understand his compassion toward us as we grieve and understand grief as a loving expression of extreme gratitude. Finally, a friend of mine works and writes for the New York Times, and recently he had a piece that said, "Grief is the price we pay for love." And he said, but so often that love is expensive, like a jumbo-sized mortgage on your heart that you may fear you would never be able to repay. And sometimes, he said, if we are really blessed, love kind of ruins us, but in the best possible way. God bless you.
Good afternoon. My name is Reverend Catherine Klemstein, and I am a retired chaplain from Hospice of the Chesapeake. I begin today asking for all of us that the sacred spirit of life, the sacred spirit of life and love be with us to give us the peace of acceptance and understanding, and the assurance in all those things that never die, those things that pass from person to person through the generations into eternity, especially love. I'm going to be talking about the holidays, and hopefully we will be able to have hope-filled holidays as we develop some understanding of grief and loss. One of the characteristics of grief and loss is that it is cumulative. Cumulative. Loss builds up over time. All the losses throughout our lives build up, and we carry them with us. It's very normal for a new loss, the loss of a loved one, will develop an opening so that you're grieving for all of your loved ones you have lost in the past. So the possibility is you will be grieving very deeply, because you're not just grieving for the recent loved one who passed away, but you are grieving deep in your heart for all the loved ones you have lost during your life. And that's why grief can be accumulative. Also, it's very comprehensive. Grief affects all of who we are, and it manifests in these ways. First of all, physically. Grief and bereavement results in physical discomfort. The body may respond with aches and pains, headaches, GI problems, fatigue, insomnia, lack of appetite, tightness in the chest, a knot in the stomach. It can cause these physical symptoms to occur. It can be also obviously very emotional. Bereavement results in emotional discomfort, and not just sadness, but a multitude of emotions. These emotions may include shock and sadness, but also anger, guilt, loneliness, yearning, even apathy, not desiring to participate in life anymore the way you used to. And sometimes relief, which is hard to comprehend, but perhaps if you've had a loved one who has been suffering for a long time, maybe you were the primary care provider, and were dedicating your life for years taking care of this loved one, sometimes a person may feel relief that their loved one is gone, that they're no longer suffering. And then they might feel guilty because they are feeling that sense of relief. But as a hospice chaplain, so often, after our patients had been through so much suffering, the family members often would feel peace and relief knowing that their loved one was now in a safe, joyful place and no longer in pain. Sometimes also you might feel guilt. Guilt because maybe you didn't get your loved one to the hospital soon enough. Or guilt because maybe you didn't take as good of care of them as you wished you had. Sometimes you might feel guilty because your emotions are not as strong as you thought they should be. Your love for them was not as strong as you thought it should be. So guilt also can be a concern and an issue during this time. Another way that bereavement results or shows itself is mentally. Bereavement results in mental cognitive discomfort. Some examples include indecisiveness, difficulty in making decisions, memory loss and confusion, difficulty concentrating, absent-mindedness. Grief can also be deeply spiritual. It can cause spiritual discomfort. Oftentimes we search for meaning, asking why, questioning our beliefs, and search for some connection or sign from the deceased. So many times, family members, patient caregivers at hospice would ask me, I don't understand why God didn't answer our prayers. How can a God who is loving and caring allow so much suffering to take place? I don't understand. And then many times they would also be looking for a sign that their loved one was in heaven, was in a place of joy and peace and calm. And they would often wait for a sign from their loved one, whether it was a dream or whether it was a coincidental event. They would look for some sign that their loved one was in a peaceful place. And grief can also affect you socially. It can result in social discomfort. Sometimes family and friends may withdraw, and we can feel isolated. And our support system may change and not be available anymore. We become disappointed that we're not receiving what we need from others or that people don't understand. And many times, too, family and friends don't know what to say. They might say, I'm sorry to hear about the loss of your loved one, but it's very hard for them to listen to the family member of the deceased and talk with them. And so sometimes family members and friends will withdraw because it makes them uncomfortable to talk with someone who has just lost a loved one. So it's also concurrent, which means that factors affect grieving are the stressors that arise during death. As we grieve the loss of a loved one, life still goes on. But we don't seem to have the energy or the desire to participate in life the way we did before. There are so many things also that we need to attend to in our lives in addition to the loss. Like we have a job to take care of, caring for homes, caring for other loved ones, and learning to do new things that we've never had to do before because maybe our loved one did them for us all the time. So we might be dealing with financial concerns, our own health issues, and also family conflicts. It's not unusual when a loved one passes that family members will differ on how their loved one should be taken care of. It may be that they might feel that the caregiver should have kept taking them to the hospital so that they would not die, when in fact the loved one had a terminal illness and there was nothing left to do but keep their loved one comfortable in hospice. Next, just trying to understand grief. Keep in mind that it is a normal response to loss. And it's ongoing, it's a dynamic process, and there's no set timetable. The time for a person to grieve may be different, and it may last a short time, a few months, or it could last for a year or two or more. So it's unique to each individual. And loss is any time life is different than the way you wanted it or expected to be. So you may have lost your role as a mother, or as a wife, or as a husband, or as a brother. And so those roles change. And you don't have a way to, you didn't know that this was going to change the way you saw yourself as well. Mourning is an outward expression of grief. Grief is what happens when it's inside your heart, when your heart is so full of tears and sadness. Everyone has the capacity to grieve when someone loved dies. But if we are to move through that grief and bring back our lives the way we want them and need them to be, we also have to mourn. We also have to mourn. So mourning is that outward expression of your pain and suffering. And according to Alan D. Wolfelt, the 6 needs of mourning is, first of all, we have to acknowledge the reality of the death. We have to acknowledge it's happened. It's true. Even though we couldn't even think of life without our loved one. Over time, we need to gently confront the reality that someone we loved will never physically be present to us again. We have to learn to embrace the pain of the loss. Embrace the pain of the loss. It is easier to avoid the pain of grief than it is to embrace it. But it is this embracing that we are able to reconcile ourselves towards it and move towards it. So we have to acknowledge the pain, recognize it, let it surface. Oftentimes I would say to my hospice family members, there's not enough room in your heart to hold all of that pain. You have to start releasing it and moving towards the healing process. It's important to remember the person who died, who lives on through our memories. So in order to heal, we need to actively remember and commemorate their lives. And you can do this in a very personal way. You can do it in a very personal way. And as I said earlier, you have to develop a new identity, because you may not be a spouse or a father or a sibling any longer. So you have to acknowledge that loss and develop your identity in a new role. Also, it's important that we search for meaning in this time of grief. It's natural, it's very natural, to question the meaning or purpose of life and death during this time. And again, you may have to re-examine your own philosophy of life. So it's an inward process, a time of reflection, a time of acknowledgement, and a time of taking care of ourselves. And taking care of yourself, be open to receiving ongoing support from others. Grief is not just a single event. It is a process which takes time, as I said earlier. And we will need the continued support of family and friends for weeks, months, and years. So we need that support and understanding of other people to help us heal. So accept that help. Acknowledge that you need help and accept it, and get the support you need at this time. And so as I close from the book of Sacred Dying, remember that there are no rule books when it comes to grief. There is no time frame. There should be no judgment. Grief is as individual as a fingerprint. Do what is right for your soul. Thank you. And now I invite Minister Jeff forward.
Pastor Jeff, and have had the privilege and honor to walk with you through some of your grief and your loss. And I always tell people, even though we may not know each other, we all have the same experience of grief, and we know what it's like to lose loved ones and to lose those that matter to us and that we have cared for. Dr. Howard Hendricks said, "God is not interested in simply working with perfect people. He's interested in working with broken people who can appreciate the contribution of His grace and His power in solving the problems, the realistic problems of their lives." And so we just wanted to offer you some ways, practical ways to deal with grief and maybe give you some hands-on things that you can do. I think one of the frustrations with loss is we don't know what to do. And the holidays are very much about doing. It's about shopping and decorating and cooking and traditions, a lot of hands-on things, the sights and the sounds and the smells of the holidays. And so we want to give you some practical ways that you can do something and to honor and remember your loved one. As Bob had mentioned earlier, there are some resources on the funeral home website, and if you want to go there and look at the resources, it gives you lots of practical ideas. I just wanted to run through a few of those with you today, maybe to encourage you, to spur you on, to give you an idea of how to handle grief and to honor and to remember your loved one. A couple of those are to create a new tradition, maybe include a toast and a prayer at a family dinner for your loved one. Maybe you want to set a place for your loved one with a name card and honor them and to remember them. Maybe to plant a flower or a tree on the anniversary date of their passing. We have some neighbors who had lost a young son in his 30s, and on the anniversary of his death, they planted a tree and they put a solar LED light out front. And every time I pull into my driveway, I see the little memorial to him. And I know that means so much to them as they remember their son in such a practical way. Also, you want to make sure to take care of yourself, to eat, exercise, get plenty of rest, take your vitamins and medications. Don't forget the practical things to help you sustain yourself as well through this holiday season. The holidays are times for people to be creative, and so maybe you want to find a creative outlet, write a memorial poem about your loved one and share it with others, make a painting or a scrapbook. Maybe find a special photograph and frame it. The first year after my mother-in-law had died, we had purchased a picture of her and put it in an ornament. And so every year when we get the Christmas tree ornaments out, we remember her fondly as we see her picture hanging in the ornament on the Christmas tree. Maybe you want to ask a friend just to help out in some specific way. The holidays are great times of remembering, and we become nostalgic, and we don't want to forget those that we have lost. Talk about the person who has died. Don't be afraid to mention their name. If you're able to talk candidly, people will be able to recognize that you are able to remember them as well, and they'll encourage you. The holidays are always great times to tell stories. And even though the stories are mixed with tears, oftentimes we find ourselves laughing about the memories of our loved ones, about the silly things that they did, or the funny things that they did, or about holidays that have passed. Lighting a candle is always a special way to do that. You can put a candle in a special place in your home, perhaps maybe at the dining room table, on the mantle, in the window, and you can light that each evening and to remember your loved one and to give thanks for that person. And we remember them by reliving those memories and just to give thanks for who they were and that we had opportunity to share life with them. Smell, taste, And remember is a great way to work through grief, perhaps prepare their favorite dish or their favorite cookie or whatever it is they enjoyed at the holidays. I know lots of folks prepare their mother's favorite recipe that's been passed down through the generations, and it's a way to honor those that we have lost and those that we have loved. Even though we may be crying as we make the Christmas cookies, it's still a great way to grieve, but also to give honor and thanks for those that we have lost. There's also a holiday planner on the resource page, and a lot of things that come up in the holidays just seem overwhelming. And so you just need permission to make choices, and perhaps some things this year are too difficult. The year after my father had died, my mom had to buy a brand new Christmas tree. She couldn't get down the same old tree. In fact, I think those Christmas decorations are still in the attic, and she hasn't looked at them for quite a few years. So make a new tradition, say no to some old traditions. Do the things that you can. You change the have-tos into want-tos. There's a lot of pressure at the holidays. I feel like I have to do certain things. And so as you grieve, just take those have-tos and turn them into want-tos. Do I really want to do this? And if not, perhaps you want to put it on pause or just give it up altogether. And so the holiday planner will help you walk through some of those things. Some family traditions are important to follow, while you might feel that others are better to be changed. One of the things that we know is that you are not alone. There's not a right or wrong way to grieve. As I have talked to people through the years who have lost loved ones, they feel like there's some kind of handbook or some kind of thing that they're supposed to be doing. But we've not walked this path before with this particular person that we have lost. And so there's not a right or wrong way to do it, but the important thing is that we do work through our grief and that we process it and that we take those, even if they're baby steps. One of the messages of Christmas is often do not fear. Whenever an angel showed up, the message was do not fear. Christmas is a time that God is with us. And someone once said that courage is not the absence of fear, but it's pushing on in spite of the fear. And so the holidays are a time for us to be courageous as we remember those that we've lost and to process our grief. A practical step that we can take is to treat the feelings like a guest. Holidays are often about inviting guests over for dinner and for get-togethers. But what if you treated your feelings the same way? Guests stay for a time, and then they leave. And grief is that process, and sometimes it's described as the waves of an ocean. The wave will come in and we'll feel overwhelmed, and then the wave goes back out to sea, and we're okay for a while. And the next wave will come in. So just treat those waves of emotion as guests. They'll be there for a while, and then they go back out, and then they come back. Practical step is just to say goodbye. The biggest thing in any loss is saying goodbye. And there comes a point when we acknowledge we're no longer going to share life with that person. And that's what makes the grieving process so difficult. But when you say goodbye, you are in charge. It's not being taken from you, and you can say goodbye in your own way and at your own time. I just talked with a lady a few weeks ago who was still grieving the loss of her father, and she didn't get to have those final conversations. And a very practical thing that I told her to do that really encouraged her is to write letters, is to express the things you wish you had expressed before, especially if in an untimely death when you didn't get to have that last conversation. Write things out as if that person would read them and read what is written. You may want to grab a nice piece of paper and a red ribbon, and you can write out the letter to your loved one and put it on the Christmas tree and put it in your home during the holidays, just to know that the things that you weren't able to say, you were able to share with them. It's a very therapeutic thing when the thoughts in our brains come out through our fingertips, out through the pencil onto the paper. It's a great way to have that last conversation. Or perhaps we need to ask for forgiveness or offer forgiveness. And writing a letter at the holidays, we all love to get handwritten Christmas cards and letters, and it's a very good way to work through that grief. Dr. Stephen Arterburn said, "It's hard to say goodbye. I think we just have to ask God to heal our wounds. Sometimes we have to write some letters. As we ask God to heal our hearts from saying goodbye, we lower our expectations, bring them back to reality, and then we can experience healing." I would encourage you this holiday season just to do something hands-on and something very practical And even if it brings up emotions of sadness and perhaps frustration and even maybe anger, anxiety, we're still able to do something. We are people with senses, and we are living in a physical place. And this holiday season is to not forget our loved ones, but look for creative ways to incorporate them in our holiday gatherings. We no longer can do things with that person, but we can do something for that person. And in that process, we will find the hope and the healing, and that God is with us, which is really the message of this holiday season. This time, Pastor Chuck will come up and walk us through another practical way to walk through our grief.
It is now our pleasure to begin our candle lighting ceremony. And we light our candles today in memory and honor of you, our loved one, recognizing that the holidays are our most difficult season, as it's when we should be surrounded by all those that we love. For us who are missing a huge part of our lives, we hope this ceremony is an opportunity to express your emotion and to have a connection with your loved one that will provide for you a sense of closure and perhaps control that was maybe robbed by COVID-19. At this time, we're going to light the 4 candles. Father Tom will light the first candle. The lighting of the first candle, we'll use your candle, Tom. The lighting of the first candle represents grief. The pain of losing someone is most intense, and this flame reminds us of the depth of our love for them. Reverend Catherine will light our second candle. The lighting of the second candle represents courage. The courage to comfort our sorrow, to comfort each other, and the courage to change our lives. Pastor Jeff will light the third candle. The lighting of the third candle is in our loved one's memory. The times we laughed, the times we cried, the times we were angry with each other, the silly things they did and said, and the caring and the joy that they gave us. I will light the fourth candle. The fourth candle is the light of love. And we light this candle so that their light will always shine. As we share this day of remembrance with our family and friends, we cherish the place in our hearts that will always be reserved for our loved one. In a moment, I'm going to read a poem as our candles burn. Right now, we're going to light our candles together. In your homes, perhaps take a moment to meditate, to pray concerning the deep emotion of each candle, that emotion that may be touching your heart at this very moment, the pain of grief, the courage to face your tomorrows, the memories of time shared, and the light of love. Light a candle, and I will light a candle for you to shatter all the darkness and to bless the times we knew. Like a beacon in the night, The flame will burn bright and guide us on our way. Oh, today I light a candle for you. The seasons come and go, and I'm weary from the change. I keep moving on. You know it's not the same. And when I'm walking all alone, do you hear me call your name? Do you hear me sing the songs we used to sing? You fill my life with wonder. You touch me with surprise. Always saw that something special deep within your eyes. And through the good times and the bad, we carried on with pride. I hold on to the love and the life that we knew, as today I light a candle for you. Again, together, our panel would like to thank Callis Funeral Homes. Worked with them for over 20 years, and I can say they're not just a business. They truly, truly care about your family. They care about our communities. And together, we wish you the most happy holiday seasons. Now, to him who's able to keep you from stumbling and to present you blameless before his presence with great joy, to the only God our Savior, be glory, majesty, dominion, and power for all time, now and forever. Amen. Thank you.
We hope today's program has provided you some understanding of what you might be feeling as the holidays approach. And we hope it gave you some thoughts and ideas of what you can do to remember your loved one this first year, as well as what you can do to help yourself as you continue on your grief journey. Remember, there is no standard path or timeline for healing from grief. Everyone's journey is different. Many thanks to our panelists and especially to you for watching. And once again, a special thanks to Hospice of the Chesapeake's Life Center. While grief can certainly be difficult to manage during the holidays, it isn't limited to the holidays. The Life Center offers programs to help throughout the year. If you're interested, I believe their contact information can be found on the handouts. If you haven't had the opportunity to download our handouts, you can still do so using the link on the front page of our website. The tab is titled Your Grief Journey Handouts. We will keep the video and the handouts available on our website from now through the first week in January. As I mentioned at the beginning of the program, please feel free to send us any questions you may have. Simply send them to holiday@callisfuneralhomes.com. Type question on the subject line, and we'll respond to you as quickly as possible. In previous years, we have offered a gift to each of our families, an ornament that memorialized their loved one. Even though this year's program is different, we wish to still offer you an ornament. If you would like one, send your request to the same email, holiday@callisfuneralhomes.com, and type ornament on the subject line. Please be sure to tell us the name of the deceased. This concludes our presentation. We invite you to stay online, however, as we remember the names of those whom we have had the privilege to serve this past year. Finally, I won't wish you anything happy or merry. I'll simply wish you a peace-filled heart this holiday season. And above all, take good care of yourself. Thank you.